All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the September meeting of the Commission on Ethics and Election Practices, Governmental Ethics and Election Practices. We can start right with item 1, the ratification of the minutes of the July 27th, 2022 meeting. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. We accept the minutes as written.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we ratify the minutes of July 27, 2022 meeting. Is there any discussion? Okay, we'll hold a vote. And since everybody's here, we can just raise our hands or say aye. Does everybody how does everybody feel about ratifying the minutes? Aye. It's been voted 5-0. The minutes are that.
We're out of practice with.
I know. I know.
It's a different gear.
All right, item number 2 is a request for an independent expenditure determination from the Poliquin campaign. Jonathan, would you like to kind of brief us on this?
Sure. This is a request by the Bruce Poliquin for Congress Committee that it is not required to file an independent expenditure report in connection with 2 TV ads and 1 radio ad. And 2 of the ads contain a very quick reference to Paul LePage by his name or by Governor LePage, and then a couple of the ads contain pictures of Mr. LePage and Mr. Poliquin together. And because these ads are being broadcast after Labor Day, the committee is here to say this is not an independent expenditure to promote Paul LePage, and no report is required. The ads, I should mention, don't refer to Paul LePage as a candidate. They don't talk about his qualifications or his experience. They don't urge any kind of a vote for him, but he is in those ads. I offered my recommendation in the memo to you, which you've all read, and I can go through it if you'd like, but Josh Tardy is here as the counsel for the Poliquin Committee, and he's here to answer any questions you have and may want to make some comments.
Mr. Tardy, would you like to come forward?
Morning, Mr. Chair. I'm Joshua Tardy, counsel for the Poliquin campaign. I've reviewed Director Wayne's memo. I appreciate his thoroughness. I agree with his conclusions. And just a point of reference, the Poliquin campaign through me reached out to Director Wayne prior to that period, or prior to Labor Day, and asked, I said, you know, the campaign was contemplating some ads that use the image of Paul LePage, and I was aware from as counsel for Susan Collins of the form that could be filed for the rebuttal, and it was through that and through the advice of Director Wayne that we submitted these 3 distinct reports. So I'm just here to answer any questions. I agree with the staff's recommendation.
Is there anyone who would like to speak on the other side of the issue? Okay, does anybody have it? Before you go, we'll see if anybody has any questions either for Mr. Wayne or for Mr. Tardy. No questions. Okay, I think we probably ought to vote on each of the 3 ads individually. So we'll consider first the ad that starts "My heart is breaking." That's a TV ad, and I will move that we determine that is not an independent expenditure. Is there a second? I'll second. Thank you. Any discussion? Yes, Mr. Mark.
I have some hesitancy about this one, not the other 2, just to put that out there. And it may be too finely going through wording, but my concern, and I'll just express it, is this. When the ad says Governor LePage needs, and I forget the next word, a partner, whatever, in Washington, to me, that's more than just a visual image. And by giving the title, you know, you can go either way. You can say, well, former governor, i.e. you call the person governor, or it's a presumption of winning a race. And that's why the title governor is in the word. I've got concerns about that. And I tend to find that this one, compared to the other 2, is in fact more of an express advocacy. And would be an independent expense. And I'm gonna vote no on this one and support the other two.
Any other discussion?
Just a question, is Mr. LePage entitled to use the term governor, having been governor?
That's maybe a question for Mr. Bolton.
Well, I think that's traditionally applied to former officials, that they're typically referred to by their former title. So I think that could potentially refer to a former official. That's just my, I haven't researched that question, but that's my general understanding of it.
Yes.
Thank you. I view this as totally, Mr. Poliquin trying to tie his name to the coattails of another person who happens to be, it could have been a
Football coach.
Paul LePage, could be a football coach, could be former President Trump. I think that was pretty clear to me. That's what the motive of this was. I don't think he was trying to spend money to get Paul LePage elected. I think it was all about getting himself elected. And if that's the case, I think then it's really is not an independent expenditure.
Any other discussion? Yes.
I think Commissioner Marble is right to some extent. I don't think it crosses the line though. I think it's about as close as you can get. I mean, if the man had never been governor, then yeah.
Mhm.
Anything else?
I'll just add, I don't think it crosses the line. I think we shouldn't point to it.
Okay. Are we ready for a vote?
Mhm.
All right, so everyone who believes that this is not an independent expenditure, please raise your hand.
I've been convinced.
Okay. So the vote is 5-0. This is not an independent expenditure. We'll move on to the radio ad. So it starts born and raised in central Maine. And I will move that we find this is also not an independent expenditure.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, everybody who also believes that it's not an independent expenditure, please raise your hand. Okay, it's 5-0 that this is not an independent expenditure. Now, I don't have the script of the third one in front of me. How does that one start? The other TV ad?
So I didn't
You
review
sent
it.
out a supplement and I didn't print it out.
I did probably bring it up here.
Yes,
That's it, right?
yes, this is the other TV ad that starts Maynard's work hard. Is everybody familiar with that? And it was Mr. Wayne sent out as a supplement. I'll move that that is also not an independent expenditure. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on this? Okay, everyone who agrees this is not an independent expenditure, please raise your hand. Perfect, it's voted 5-0 that this is also not an independent expenditure. And we'll move on to item 3. This is another request for determination of an independent expenditure. This is on behalf of the Maine First Project PAC. Mr. Wayne, would you like to tell us about it?
Sure, and I just wanted to offer clarification on in the way we describe this. The party that's here today asking for the determination is the nonprofit corporation. Some of the same people also have a PAC organized, but this was, I believe, paid for by the nonprofit. And it's asking for a determination that it's not required to file an independent expenditure report in connection with a mailing that it sent to some residents in South Portland. And the mailing is very critical of immigration policy, both at the local level in Southern Maine, but also at the state level. And the mailing makes reference to Governor Mills, Democratic officials generally, and also the city government of Portland in a critical way. But the mailing doesn't refer to Governor Mills as a candidate, doesn't refer to her election, doesn't urge a vote against her. So for these reasons, we're recommending a determination that this is not an independent expenditure, or what other, get into the intention of costs. That's the direction you're going to go in. Mr. Lockman is here today and he can answer any questions that you have.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Lane. Any questions for Mr. Lane? Yes, please.
Just what's the significance of the application by Maine First, the PAC versus the application by Maine First, the nonprofit organization?
I don't think it makes a lot of difference myself, but it was a mistake. We made the assumption this was paid for by the PAC, and that's how we framed it in the memo and on the agenda. So just on the record, I wanted to say,
So Mr. Lockman made the request. This is the organization.
he sent an email, so I figured he would appreciate it if we made it clear. Yeah,
Thank
You
you.
want to be correct.
yes.
Any other questions for Mr. Lane? Mr. Lockman, would you like to come forward?
Yeah, thank you.
Terrific.
Good
Please.
morning. I guess I'll just say very briefly, I wholeheartedly support the recommendation of the staff.
That's very brief. Terrific. Any questions for Mr. Lockman? It appears there are none. Are we ready for a vote? Or is there any discussion? Would anybody like to discuss? Okay, yes, please.
I'm going to express similar concerns that I did before with the other one, only more so in this case. As I've said many times here before ad nauseum, I'm not an attorney. I may not think quite as black and white analytically as some of you have been trained to do. To me, the combination of what I think is inflamed rhetoric, some of the labeling, the general reference to politicians, the reference to the governor as the swamp queen, the reference to Greg Payne, the housing person. It's not so much that it's an attack, which I mean, it obviously is, right or wrong. I'm not here to judge that. But when you name the governor and you name a housing initiative and you mislabel the governor and you're soliciting funds to recruit more people to compete against these policies, some of those people would be politicians and candidates. So this to me drifts into, this is an independent expenditure. And I'm sure there will be differing opinions on the board, on the commission.
Is there further discussion?
I'll just add, I think what you're saying is valid, but one of the reasons that it doesn't drip for me, I guess I'll say, is because it mentions so many different entities and persons, and clearly the issue is it's immigration, and it's talked about all these other individuals and entities related to immigration. So for me, that was actually kind of one of the reasons why it didn't drip for me. And the fact that the governor is currently the governor, and I think that when it comes to a governor who's running for re-election, it has to be, in my mind, it would have to be more directed towards advocating against her, which I don't think this crosses the line.
Yeah, and I think I agree. I think it's sometimes difficult to draw a line between criticizing current public servants who are doing their job as public servants, but also candidates. And I think this falls in the line. It falls on the side of criticizing a public servant rather than trying to defeat a re-election. To me. Any other discussion? Yes.
I think Commissioner Morrow is correct. This is closer to the line than the others, but I would agree with Commissioner Newman that it probably doesn't actually cross the line.
Anything else? Okay. The motion is that this mailing for Maine First project is determined not to be an independent expenditure. All those who agree, please raise your hand. All those who disagree, please raise your hand. So the vote is 3-2, and it's not determined not to be an independent expenditure. Moving on to agenda item 4. This is a request for a waiver of late filing penalty by John Chambers And David Burns is the treasurer. Mr. Wayne.
Yeah, I have Mr. Burns is supposed to be joining.
Okay. Good morning, Senator Burns.
Good morning, folks.
You can hear us okay?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, well, I'm the only one making noise, so.
All right.
We'll have Mr. Wayne give us a brief background on this item.
So David Burns is the treasurer for a legislative candidate, John Chambers. And he's here today to ask on behalf of the campaign for a waiver of a late filing penalty. This is in connection with a report that was due on July 26th, which was a Tuesday. And he explains in his waiver request that on the previous day, on the Monday, he had entered the transaction into our electronic filing website. And he absolutely intended to file the report. He says he clicked the little button that is labeled file report, but he got a late filing email after the deadline and then was alerted that it had not actually been filed according to our system, and so therefore he filed it 1 day late. So the preliminary penalty is $34.90. And what I should add is that we don't doubt Mr. Burns' good intentions. I've known him for a little bit, for some time, because he's a former state senator, and I absolutely appreciate everything he says in his letter. The system, I'll say a little bit more about the website and then offer our recommendation. The website is designed so that there are some immediate confirmations to anyone filing a report that the report has actually been filed. They don't have to wait. They can, while they're in that setting, if they believe they filed the report, they can see a confirmation in a few different ways. And it's a good idea to do that, just like for all of us, when we pay a bill or renew a license, there's often something on screen, or there's an email where you can confirm that the transaction or the filing was made. I guess I won't run through all of them, but there's a pop-up message that pops up for 5 seconds. There's an email that goes out right away. You don't have to wait for the email. Then on the home page, there's sort of a list of reports, and they're in different sections. So once a report is filed, it goes from the section on upcoming reports to the recently filed reports section. So it does take a little observation, but the information is there. The commission does have a track record of not fully granting waivers, even when someone comes forward and says, I tried, but I was prevented by this or that reason. There's often some penalty just to reinforce that it's important that the process get completed and that the information be available to the public. So in the past, the commission, when there are waived, the preliminary penalties are above $200 to $300. There's a reduction to something in that range. But in this case, the preliminary penalty starts at $34.90. So the staff's recommendation is that we have empathy for Mr. Burns. We understand what happened, but penalty of $34 seems commensurate with the harm to the public. The report was a day late. So we're recommending no waivers.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question with respect to a penalty, regardless of the amount being imposed. If there's a further violation, does that get factored in at all? Later down the road, the campaign is late again for some reason.
Yeah, that's a good question. And in fact, there's sort of a formula, and it does escalate. So there's a percentage in the formula, and so for the first violation, the percentage is 2%. The second violation in the same year is 4%. And then I believe the third violation is 6%. So it kind of goes up, and it's intended to alert people that, oh, this really matters, and I better not make the same mistake next time. So
Thanks for that information.
Are there other questions for Mr. Wayne? Mr. Burns, Senator Burns, would you like to tell us about it from your perspective?
Sure, I'd love to. First of all, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do this by Zoom. It's over a 3-hour trip to Augusta. And I do appreciate Mr. Wayne's presentation of my position. But without reiterating everything, I just want to mention a couple of things. First of all, it's not about the money. This has been a difficult process for somebody of my era anyway. I'm 73 years old. And the reason that I filed the appeal was because one of your justifications for appeals was that a bona fide effort had been made. On Saturday, the 23rd, I always try to get these done beforehand so I can file them appropriately. I tried desperately to get into the system and was unable to do that. And by Monday, of course, Monday morning, the first thing I did was contact Ms. Gordon, Aaron, to help me. And I learned that my password to the system had been changed. As far as I know, unbeknownst to me, I don't recall receiving any notification, but your system no longer accepts some of the symbols that were on my password to get in. So I was unaware of that. I couldn't get in. She helped me to change my password. Actually, I just eliminated one symbol, ampersand, off the end of it, which is something I use other places. And I was able to get in. I spent the morning of Monday to get the report done. Again, it's a difficult process following through your system, for me anyway. And thought I had everything completed. As Mr. Wayne says, I pushed the file button, thought everything went through, and I did not. I was negligent to go to my email and look. That's where at least presently, that's where I see the confirmation now, having just filed another report, that the report has been filed and available to me to review. So I was under the assumption that it was all done. I went about my business. Tuesday, I was on the road all day. And then, of course, Wednesday, I got the notice. For what it's worth, you folks are very good at sending reminders before, or your staff is very good at sending reminders before a report is due. It would have been very nice to have received a notice that you're a day late already, rather than you're automatically in violation and you're going to receive a penalty. So that's in a nutshell what as I said in my written appeal, that's what happened. I will say, for your benefit, I don't know how many of you on the commission have actually tried to file a report. I know the staff is very good at this. If it wasn't for Aaron, Ms. Gordon, I wouldn't be able to get through this each time we have to file. But for 8 years, I had the same treasurer, Mr. Sprague, who was a retired educator and also a computer programmer. He constantly had to call your staff, and I'm sure your staff would remember him, to get directions and clarifications on how to file. So I don't feel that I'm the only one that's inept when it comes to technology. I don't know if other treasurers and other people that have to do this have the same issue as I do, but I'll admit I'm technologically challenged. I do the best I can with this, and I do believe that I made a bona fide effort on behalf of my candidate, Mr. Chambers. This money doesn't come out of my pocket. It comes out of his pocket for his election campaign. But again, I feel I made a bona fide effort, and I appreciate your opportunity to present that to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions of Senator Burns?
Yeah, I just want to clarify one point. Senator Burns, you indicated that the commission doesn't notify you when you fail to send in a report, but I'm looking at our write-up on this, and Wayne, if you could confirm on what happens on page 3 after unsuccessful filing. The last bullet item says that the report is not filed on time an email was sent out the next morning to all associated. Would that have been the case in this case as well?
That's right. I'll express my understanding and then my colleagues who are more familiar will jump in if I misstate it. But my understanding is the report is due on July 26th at 11:59 PM. If it's not filed by that time in the wee hours of the morning, after midnight, an email goes out saying that the report is late. And I mean, at that point, it is late. And a penalty, we feel the need to talk about penalties and so forth in that email just to get people's attention. And so that email did go out. And I believe that's what prompted him to file the report. But that's my understanding.
Senator Burns, do you know if you received that report, that email after
Just,
deadline?
well, I'm just looking through my phone right now. I know that I certainly received an email saying that the report was late, a day late, and that a penalty would be assessed. I don't recall anything saying that I should. No, I don't recall receiving one that was just a warning, if that's what you're asking. I think it was a done deal.
No, it was after the deadline. Apparently, some hours after the deadline.
The morning after the deadline.
And the deadline would have been midnight, I think Mr. Wayne said midnight on the 27th.
On the 26th.
On the 26th.
Yeah,
So it would have been the morning of the 27th.
yeah, the morning of the 27th. Again, the only email that I recall receiving, and I can't find them here on my phone, but the only ones I recall receiving was, you filed late, you're a day late, and you're gonna have a penalty assessed.
That's probably the one we're talking about.
Yeah, I think we're
Yes,
talking.
I think so. Yeah, in other words, it's over.
That's right. The door is shut.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just
Appreciate it, but-
for point of clarification, do the rules or statutes require some interim email saying you're getting close to the late deadline? I mean, once they're late, they're late.
Right, well, there's
There's no like gray area there.
and as Mr. Burns mentioned, there are a lot of pre-deadline emails, including some personalized ones that our staff sends out.
Yeah. Which are very helpful.
And you did receive those, Senator Burns?
Oh, yes, I did. And that's why I started diligently on Saturday morning, which was 3 days early.
Right.
And if I'd been able to get in to my report, then I probably would have had more time to make sure that I had done everything appropriately, but I do this every month and a half, 2 months, whatever it is, 42 days. I don't know. I don't do it very often. And if you don't do something very often at my age, you sometimes you forget the steps.
At any age.
At any age, I suppose.
Any other questions for?
Well, I just do have, I don't have any questions, but just for discussion.
Oh, please.
I do appreciate and think about what Senator Burns stated about the aspect that, or, one of the things that we can consider as a bona fide effort. And I guess I just wonder what that means. It seems that we have several cases here today where folks seem to have made a bona fide effort. However, I also think it's pretty black and white. I know that the commission does a lot to make sure things are fine. And so I'm struggling with what that means.
Mr. Let me segue
Yeah,
into
please.
some of thoughts on that. Mr. Burns, first of all, know that I can empathize with age-related issues.
Thank you.
And to add a little more levity to this, I'm reminded of recently switching from cable to streaming with a smart TV, and I decided that all my smart TVs need a little parenthetical message that says, by the way, you're stupid, down the bottom. I
Thanks a
can
lot.
empathize. And I did run for office and have dealt from that level
Okay.
with this, and I know it's challenging. Where I'm gonna go to, though, at the heart of this is, it's sort of how many angels on the head of the pin kind of stuff. We have dealt with many of these similar issues. I'm feeling like an old veteran now. And I'm listening in my mind to past conversations.
no one sitting here this morning is going to question the validity of your efforts and the sincerity of what you've expressed. That's not an issue. The small size of the penalty is a minor factor. It almost has the effect of saying, what are we really doing here? But I'm hearing previous commissioners talk about precedent and talk about supporting staff and talking about most specifically, and you tried because you didn't work on Saturday, but most specifically, getting it done ahead of time and checking. It's the only way to make sure this stuff is right. So in a perfect world, you'd have done it Friday. And late Friday morning over another cup of coffee, you would have called in and said, hey, did you get it? Are we all set? And they would have said, no, hit this button and everything would be fine. And I think a little bit reluctantly, for precedent and consistency, I'm gonna find that there was a violation here.
Yeah, I think I am the same. I guess I'm just
But you can
I'm
feel a
just
little stuck
thinking
at the same
about
time.
what is going to be
Right,
the
what's
situation,
possible.
yeah, what's bona fide. I just,
Mr. Bolt, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think the statute gives the commission a lot of discretion here in terms of thinking about what is and isn't bona fide. And I think you could find that there was a bona fide effort and still determine that some penalty or the full penalty was warranted, because the statute is phrased in terms of a may. And here, I think one thing to consider is the small size of the penalty is mitigation warranted where it's already so small, given that you may be concerned about deterrence and other issues. And I think you could take that into account, but you could also, there's been evidence presented that there was at least some bona fide effort here. So you could take that into account if you felt it was sufficient and you felt it was warranted based on the other concerns you might have. But there's really wide, just especially on this section B, which is the bona fide effort. I think it's written in a way to give you very wide discretion.
So could you explain that a little? How would we kind of acknowledge the bona fide effort and still impose the penalty?
I think you could frame your motion as, we agree there was some evidence of a bona fide effort here, but for other reasons, we're declining to waive the penalty in this circumstance. You could reduce the penalty by a percentage amount. So you could reduce it by, I don't want to throw out a number, but obviously it'd be a small amount, given the small amount of the penalty, to reflect that you do see some bona fide effort here. I guess those would be the two options that jump to mind.
Terrific.
I mean, our role is compliance, and I've always I'm not on commission long, but view the bona fide analysis as a kind of internal candidate specific bona fide effort versus like a system-wide internet shutdown. Somebody waited until the last day, that's fine. But 3 hours before midnight, there was an internet blackout, or they got in a car accident, something that is not a failure of skill or effort. Because when we start going down that road, the commission staff has so many candidates that it has to deal with. And that's kind of my thought on what bona fide is. Okay, so I waited until 9 o'clock the day before, and I went to my computer and there's this technological disaster that has nothing to do with me. Not that I didn't check or I didn't file my form right. And that's my thought on it, having had the responsibility of filing reports and, not being that good at it. And still take that interpretation of qualified.
Commissioner,
Yeah, it seems to me like, as Commissioner Rubble said, we're starting to hear quite a few of these over the years, and I mean, we found violations when the filing was 4 or 5 minutes late.
Yeah.
The commission seems to have drawn a hard line on the assumption of the importance of these filings being made. And when I look at that section D, you know, it gives us discretion, but the examples they use are situations that are really out of the control of the filer, not in their own control. You know, unexplained delays in postal service or interruption in internet. So that if they had done everything properly, even actually pushed the right buttons, that it couldn't have gone through. That's what they're kind of leading to. So this is, we've heard many cases that are quite similar to this. Very good faith efforts, but just a failure to actually push the last button.
And that's kind of where I come down to. To me, I recognize the effort that Senator Burns put in, and I recognize I want to applaud the fact that he tried to do it early. But I think for the health of the system, I think we need to continue drawing a hard line on cases such as this. I'm of the feeling that we should not waive the fine.
Yeah, I want to say I agree. I mean, I want this discussion because I think it's important to think about. I think frankly, I'd be surprised if we have any cases where somebody said I didn't make any effort. I mean, you know,
I believe you guys are.
I just didn't do it. So I agree.
That would be very honest.
And so I agree with the slippery slope. I just, you know, I think about it, you know, the statute, but I agree. I think that making the hard line as difficult, you know, as it is the right way to go, especially in this case where the fine is, you know, I don't think to me, I don't feel mitigation is necessary because of the low fine.
All right, any other discussion? I'll move that we do not waive the fine.
Second.
Yeah, any more discussion? Everyone who agrees that we should not waive the fine, please raise your hand. Okay, it's 5-0. Senator Burns, thank you for your discussion. It really caused us to have a thoughtful discussion on the issue, and I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to it. And once again, I'm very thankful for the staff that they have as much patience as they do. I just wish they were available 24/7.
I'm sure they do too.
Well, they do too. So I'll be hearing the instructions for getting the fine to you.
Yes, we'll contact you and let you know how to do that.
Thank you very much, folks. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to agenda item 5. This is a request for waiver of late filing penalty by Benjamin Michael John. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Mr. Wayne?
Yeah, I just want to look to Julie and see, all right, he is not joining us. He had said in an email to me that he would try to join us by Zoom, but and we sent him the link, but he's not.
He's not here.
Yeah, so I mean, our suggestion would be just to move on.
Sure.
So I'll introduce it and let you decide how you want to deal with it.
Sure.
So he is a candidate for state senate, District 7, and he was required to file a report on that same deadline, which is July 26th. And he started filing the report within the last hour before the deadline, a little after 11 p.m. on the 26th. And he was using his phone to try to file the report. He had some difficulty. I think it was, my recollection is that he was trying to enter the expenditures and he couldn't quite get the payees entered. Then he resorted to another system to file the report, and it was filed at about 1:30 a.m. So the preliminary penalty is $18.03 based on the formula and the percentage and the amount of activity in the report. I did want to reassure the commission that, you know, how the system is designed, it's designed to be compatible with Safari, Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, and Mozilla's Firefox. And it was designed for desktop computers. There's some cumbersomeness and clumsiness maybe in filing it on the phone. And when we turn to these vendors to create these systems, they're trying to set them up in a way for a lot of different state and municipal clients. And it can be done on the phone. But it's a little hard because it's a small size screen and you have to minimize certain things and it's just, it could be easier on the phone, but our understanding is it can't be done and we've tested it and we believe it can't be done. So, we understand he had difficulty. We understand there was an attempt to file it on time, but the preliminary penalty amount is $18.03. We think there wasn't a great deal of public harm in those 90 minutes, but we think $18 is commensurate with the public harm, and so we recommend no.
Thank you, Mr. William. Still no Mr. Michael John? Okay. I have a question. In section 1020A, paragraph 4A, the last paragraph, it talks about a registration report may be provisionally filed by transmission of a facsimile copy of the duly executed report to the commission, as long as the facsimile copy is filed by the applicable deadline and an original of the same form is received by the commission within 5 calendar days. So he apparently at 11:58 on the due date sent, it looks like, an email with all of the information to the commission. What's the status of that? What do you think?
Well, that is, I wouldn't want to say disregard that because that's in the law. But that is sort of what I would view it as a holdover for when all these reports were filed on paper.
Mhm.
So the legislature wanted an opportunity to allow for facsimile, but for filing. But since that time, the legislature in the mid-2000s, the first decade of the 2000s, moved to a system of mandatory electronic filing. So everyone is, the candidates and the PACs are required to file electronically using our e-filing website unless they ask for a waiver. If they say, and this could be available to Mr. Burns, for example, if he feels he doesn't have the technological ability or the computer to file it online, he can file it on paper. So we, I might need to give it more thought. We actually expect everyone to use the e-filing system unless they've asked for a waiver. So I think in our minds, day to day, we've sort of, this isn't law, but it's sort of something, I don't want to say it's a nullity, but it's just, there's this other law that says they have to file it electronically. And so
this provision is still hasn't been overridden or
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Bolton, what do you think?
It's an interesting issue. I think, facsimile copy probably refers to a fax machine paper copy, which goes back to the idea that this is sort of a relic of the paper era that we don't have anymore. So I think you could, I think given the expectation of electronic filing, you could read this as sort of, it's in the law, but it's obsolete at this point because well, he didn't transmit if he had transmitted a copy by fax, I suppose it might put it within the statute more plainly. I'm not sure an email. I'm not sure the legislature had emails in mind when they wrote the statute. And it isn't really consistent with the rest of the framework for how the Ethics Commission expects people to file. So I think there's some ambiguity there. I'm not saying this is clear cut, but I guess I'd be reluctant to sort of credit an email. That's just my personal view on it. But I think you could interpret the statute either way, I think, reasonably.
Mr. White.
I don't mean to preempt Commissioner Leclerc, but I just wanted, now that I see his email, I mean, this happens every so often that a candidate is required to file a complete report and they're having some kind of trouble and it's a late night. And so they send us some of the data that's required in the report by email and they hope that's sufficient. So that comes up every so often. And that's what Mr. Mickeljohn did here. I mean, we would urge some reluctance to accept that as a report. I mean, that the information is not available to the public right away. It takes, somebody has to enter the data, them after the deadline or us. And also the data is not complete. There are certain purpose codes and things that need to be filled out. So it's not an email of some of the data required in the report. It's not the same as faxing a complete report. If that's
What's missing from his email that would ordinarily be in the report?
Well, I'm now looking at it. I mean, I mean, it is, now that I'm looking at this, I honestly hadn't really examined this issue, because for me, we're so ingrained in thinking it's got to be on the e-filing
Right,
system.
right.
There is an expenditure code, which is sort of a broad category of the purpose of report. Some of the addresses for the payees are not present, or at least GoDaddy is not. Their address is available online. That's not present. My colleagues might see some other data point that is missing. I mean, it's mostly complete, but again, it's not a file. It's not a report. It's just sort of most of the information that needs to be in a report, and it doesn't do the trick of making it available to the public, which is the whole idea of filing a report. And
Yep.
so that's how we would look at it.
Just another thing that just occurred to me as Mr. Wayne was talking is that the statute does require that it be a duly executed report, and I assume Jonathan would know better than I would, but when you file these, you are certifying in some way, right, that they're to their accuracy. So an email would not satisfy that requirement, I think, of being duly executed, unlike a paper report that they sign.
I think there's also a statute that they have to be on forms created by us, by the commission, for it to be an actual official report. This is not a report. This is some information transmitted to us.
Right, but
So
that's what this provision of the statute seems to contemplate. It says it can be provisionally filed.
Right, but on a report, like when we get fax reports, we have paper versions of the reports they can fill out.
Yes.
So that's like if someone faxed this to us and it was just like a spreadsheet of data, we wouldn't consider that a report that's been filed.
Yep.
So that's.
Any thoughts from the commission?
Just the term facsimile is an exact copy. And the importance of having the information presented on a form that commission staff has put together.
Any other thoughts? Yes, Commissioner.
I'm really glad you brought it up. It's part of this helpful process, but I go back to just two things. Staff reporting of the mobile devices on which it could be submitted. And our common finding from almost all of these about this gentleman had tried it 24 hours earlier. None of this would be happening. So again, just feel that there is a fine.
We do hear these people, the candidates tell us how difficult the system seems to be, but then I think about it. There are, what? 350 candidates for the legislature in Maine, and 99% of them are able to do it.
Yeah.
Without problem, so I'm not, that's anecdotally tells me it's not that hard.
I just have a.
Please.
Is there a set time between when a report could be filed and when it needs to be filed? And what's that cutoff? How many days is there? For the people actually have to do this. Right, so they have the information.
Like how early could they do it?
It has to be complete as of a certain date, right? So I would assume after that date.
For this particular report, it's a 7-day gap, so it has to be complete as of 7 days earlier. So they have 7 days. That's correct, right? For the
Yes.
July report. So they have 7 days to compile the information and get it entered, and then click the file button.
Thank you.
You can enter data into the site at any time. So if you're asking about the technical window, entry can happen at any time. So you can live update as you go, and the system saves your transactions until you're ready to actually file the report. So they can do it live as they go. Time.
I just want to say, in relation to our last discussion too, it's similar to me within the respect of, him trying to email and get the information over, but I also have the same concerns of the slippery slope. I think if we find that the commission's gonna have a lot of people last minute emailing them the information, and I don't think that's a good path for us to go down.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I just have another observation that might guide how you want to move forward with this. I think your observation about the statute, if the commission were to determine that, this email was a facsimile copy, that would go to whether a violation occurred rather than whether the commission should waive or not. So it just may be something to bear in mind as you're thinking about how to formulate motions.
True.
Yes.
Let me point out one other thing. You talk about facsimile, but go to section 2 and it says that campaign finance report, the first sentence says that campaign finance report is not timely filed unless a properly signed or electronically submitted copy of the report. Substantially conforming to the thing. I don't think, an email, even if it lists all of the expenditures and receipts. All of us.
Okay, are we ready for a motion? I'll move that we do not waive the fine.
Second.
Everybody who agrees, please raise your hand. 5-0, the fine is not waived. And I appreciate the discussion. I think I just wanted to have that discussion to work through the way the sketch operates. I hope I didn't waste anybody's time.
No, I bet our executive director is considering future dialogues with the legislature.
That might be a good idea, yeah.
It is true, you know. Language.
Yeah, right. Can really
Kind of
screw you
rides
up.
along.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to item 6. This is also a request for a waiver of late filing penalty by the Waldo County Democratic Committee. Democratic Committee.
She did not ask to join, but I did send her 2 invitations.
Okay, she
But I
did
haven't
receive the
seen-
invitation, so she may just be out.
I'm sorry.
Feel free to come forward. Thank you. Mr.
Hi.
Wayne, well, I'm gonna ask Mr. Wayne to kind of give us a background first.
Sure. This is a request by the Waldo County Democratic Committee for a penalty waiver. As a party committee, it was required to file a semi-annual report on Friday, July 15th. And we received a waiver request from Pamela Chase, who I believe is the committee treasurer. And we thought she might be on Zoom, but she's not. So we're fortunate to have the chair of the committee here today to speak on behalf of the waiver. And she expressed to me earlier that among her other comments, she'd like to offer clarification on the level of experience of Ms. Chase in filing these reports previously. Ms. Chase had some interactions with the commission staff, and she states that she believes she had filed it on time. And this was on a Friday, but our system did not record it as having been filed. And so it was discovered on the next Monday that it was late. And our staff member filed a report for the committee in order that, because the penalties, to Commissioner Newman's question, they increase every day. So sometimes if, we will take once we hear to the filer that they really try to do it, sometimes we offer, should we file it for you? But in this case, Emma went forward and filed it. Similar to the last case, I just want to draw your attention to some of the features in the system, that it is someone who's filing as a candidate or as a treasurer. There's a pop-up message to indicate to them that the report was filed. It's up there on the screen for about 4 or 5 seconds, which is kind of, it's a reasonable amount of time, I think, to see that message. There's an email that goes out immediately. There's a message there's a listing of reports on the homepage. So once it's filed, the report goes from the upcoming reports section to the recently filed reports section. So there are different confirmations available to the treasurer or the filer, but they need to look for them, and they need, so because the report was 3 days late, and because of the amount of activity in the report, the preliminary penalty is about $181. There have been some previous local party committees that have come before the commission in the past couple of years who started out with a penalty of $500, and the commission reduced it down to $100. In this case, we were not recommending a reduction down to 100 because there was a significant amount of financial activity in the report, which I explained in the memo. $2,000 in $2,300 in cash contributions, $2,800 in in-kind contributions, and $3,000 expenditures. That information was 3 days late. I'm sorry, Ms. Chase isn't here, but unlike some of the other circumstances that you occasionally hear about, I think that the filing of the report was within her control. And then $181 is not significantly higher than 100, so we didn't feel as much of a pressure to reduce it. So that's the basis for our recommendation.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Wayne? Okay, ma'am, would you introduce yourself and tell us what's going on?
Okay, thank you. My name is Sarah Sally. I'm the chair of the Waldo County Democratic Committee. Good morning, commissioners. Thanks for the chance to speak with you. I'm sorry that Pam wasn't able to get online this morning. We had a good, I was glad to hear the discussion about good faith efforts and the technical aspects of the filing. So that does apply to our situation. But there was a factual error in the statement that was prepared by staff that I wanted to bring some attention to. It claims that Pam Chase was an experienced filer and that she had filed 8 reports in the past 4 years, and that's incorrect. She's only ever filed 1 report in January of this year, and then the July report, which she did not complete the filing. Pam was only elected our treasurer last November. She was elected following the resignation of our previous treasurer who suffered a stroke. So our previous treasurer was not able to help Pam. Our treasurer prior to that was very experienced, but and helped with the January report. But over the summer, she has been nursing her husband, who is in late stage ALS, so she was not able to be called upon to help. Pam did initiate the process early. She submitted all the information and was in communication with staff to make sure that it was correct. And at about 5 o'clock on the deadline day, she thought she had submitted it. She thought she had done the final step to get it submitted, and she had just raised questions to be sure that it was 100% accurate, and that she assumed that, and I believe she was told that could be addressed on Monday. And then she received a notice. So she's in a similar situation to Senator Burns. The good faith effort, working with staff, and then not realizing that it had been filed. You get a lot of notice when it is filed, but if you don't know to look for that, it does create that problem, making an assumption that the filing went through. So for those reasons, I understand your position on not waiving a penalty, but I would ask under the circumstances where we have a good faith effort and we also have an inexperienced filer, that you reduce the penalty to $100, which is consistent with my understanding of some prior cases.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your consideration.
Oh, of course, thank you. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I guess I just, I know that this Chase isn't here, but do you know what it was that happened? That she thought was it an internet outing that she pressed file and hadn't gone through, or no connection, or do you have any information?
She thought she pressed file. She thought she filed it. She was very convinced that she filed it. She had tried to reach one of the staff by phone that day and was not able to. So I don't know, but the question I understand was about the accuracy of some of the data entry, not about the filing. She was very confident that she had filed it on time. So I think it was just that last step. I mean, certainly in our area, she and I both live in Liberty. Internet is very glitchy, but I don't know if there was any outage that day that stopped it.
Are there other questions?
Yeah, I mean, her experience would be relevant to me in establishing a fine level. Quoting, Ms. Chase stated that she only found one previous report, as you said, but our write-up here indicates that according to e-filing records, we had filed 8 previous reports for the Waldo County Democrat. Is that inaccurate perhaps?
Mr. Lane?
Well, I hate to put my colleague, Ms. Burke, on the spot. That was her impression from
She doesn't
reading.
mind being on the spot.
Okay, all right.
No, I mean, I have to go by, so we have, and I'm looking at it now, and I double checked it multiple times. On the administrative side, we can see an event log, so we can see what users log in when, and then which username is tied to when a report is filed. I can go back and see that Pam's username was used to file reports going back into 2018. It is possible, and I think Jonathan will agree with me, it's possible there could have been, when the treasurer changed, that perhaps the previous username was overwritten with Pam. So it's basically now assigning a different username to what happened.
Oh, the system could have substituted her username for
The
the
past
prior
one, I
treasurer.
mean, I'm assuming that she knows more about the committee history than I do, that, I just went by what I was seeing in our records. So that was my impression initially, was that she was experienced and had filed multiple reports. So, if they are saying that that's not the case and they had a previous treasurer, then I would imagine that's accurate, and the tech stuff is more likely to have an error in it.
Thank you for that. Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure if this is relevant, and I'm not sure if you were involved, but I seem to remember that at the time Pam became treasurer, communications from the commission were about the reporting were still coming with a previous treasurer's name on them. And I think it may have been a username, and that Pam had to have some communications to update that. And I wonder if that was related to it being overwritten, because there was still something in some of the form communications that would have the old treasurer's name, even though the new contact information was there. So that was fixed. Maybe that happened, but in any event, I have our minutes from November last year where she was elected treasurer, and it was the first time that I know of that she served our committee as treasurer. I've been chair since 2018.
Sure. Thank you very much. I have a kind of a technical question for Mr. Wayne, Ms. Burke. So we filed the report on their behalf, right?
I did, yeah.
Is there a mechanism to kind of verify that that the numbers we put down are correct?
I did not enter any data into the system. I just clicked the file button. So I had received an email from Pam at 5:20 p.m. on the Friday, the deadline, and it said, I have filed the report. I have questions about how a couple of the transactions look. We can talk about that on Monday and file an amendment if necessary. So considering I had that email from her, I was pretty confident that the data that needed to be in there, if she thought she had filed it, to me, that seemed like it was complete. We hadn't been able to talk by phone on Friday because I was so busy, but she and I had emailed back and forth about how to enter this, how to enter that several times. And then I got that email that said she had filed it. I tried to call her on Monday morning when I realized it wasn't filed. The connection was terrible. And so at that point, I was like, I don't want to drag out a penalty, perhaps, if I can't get in touch with her over bad cell service. So I just filed it.
No, thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
I think everybody appreciates that.
Yes, we do. as well.
Any other questions or comments?
Oh, I'm just sitting here stuck with another image of, would it matter if it were a 24-year-old driver or a 51-year-old driver if they were both driving 8 miles an hour over the speed limit? It's subjective stuff in the middle of guidance again, but this has been very helpful in terms of putting together more information.
Commissioner Hastings.
Just to tell you where I'm coming from on this. She being as inexperienced, more inexperienced than I had understood, I'm willing to reduce the penalty to $100 request. And I think there was they did try, missed the deadline, but tried and inexperienced. In the past, we've been a little bit more lenient sometimes with county and town committees, which sometimes go years between needing to file because of their financial, how much money's involved.
Yeah.
Sounds like your committee is a little more active than many are, but it may have to file more often, but nevertheless,
It's still only every 6 months, with our level of activity, so, it's easy to forget some of the technical points in between those periods.
This was tricky for me. I mean, she did it, but what we like people do, which is try early to file, contacting people, and then, my understanding tried to get in touch with Ms. Berg for 4 to 5 p.m. before the deadline, and obviously the commission is very busy. I'm not faulting the commission, but I really struggled. It seems like she did everything. She certainly thought she would have filed, and certainly also in a part of the state. And then we had the phone that shows you there was, connection, errors. So I'm struggling with. I'm certainly in favor of reducing the penalty, and I would even, and I know the tradition is to do 100, and I think that's really important. However, based on these facts, I just, I'm calculating, I did some math, and I might even be in favor of reducing it to $60.40, which would, I understand, be the penalty if it was just a day late, which I think maybe might be more appropriate because it was intended to be
It was one business day.
right that late.
I'm impressed. Commend using.
Wow.
That's 2%. So anyway, so I guess I don't know if that's a recommendation or that's just food for thought, but that's what I guess I'll make a motion that it
Please
be
do.
reduced to $60.40.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion?
I think that I like the math. I mean, these penalties aren't saying, no, you're bad or you're,
Right.
yeah, it's to get people's attention. And I think going forward, $64 does that.
You have our, yes, you have our attention. Pam feels terrible. She feels horrible. I've tried to assure her that she should not. And I think, having heard some of the other cases, I can clearly do that, she's in pretty good company. Not the company she's gonna be in next time.
Right. Tell her you have a way for her to feel better, which is for her to take you out for brunch. Talk about it.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we reduce the fine to $60 and
40 cents.
40 cents. $60 and 40 cents. Everyone who would like to impose or would like to impose that fine but waive the calculated fine, please raise your hand. It's voted 5-0 that the fine be reduced to $60.40.
Oh, Chase is just now. Should I put her on?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, just.
Everybody with me.
She's probably been texting me.
Well, I sent her an email letting her know we were hearing it now. She could.
Asked to unmute and
Good morning, Ms. Chase. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. I'm gonna just turn up my volume a little bit.
Okay.
There, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay, we can hear you perfectly and see you even.
Okay.
I'll let you know what happened. We just voted to triple the fine. No, we didn't. We voted to reduce the fine to $60.40. That kind of recognizes the fact that you are fairly inexperienced in filing these reports and that you did make an effort to do it. That you tried on the day that it was due to contact Ms. Burke, and because she was so busy, that was impossible. So we took all that into account. We still have to impose some fine because the report wasn't filed on time, and so that's what we did. Unfortunately, you just missed the vote. We would have loved to have your input, but
Okay.
is there anything you'd like to say?
No, I understand what you've done, and I do appreciate the reduction in the fine. And I also, when I spoke with Emma, I believe on the 15th, I asked her if there's a way to input information monthly as I do the monthly treasurer's report, so that I don't have to do all 6 months to do the semi-annual filing. And she said that that's available. So I'm gonna do that, and I should be in better shape for the next filing.
That's a spectacular idea, but yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for coming. Thank you both for coming and for your help.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sure, thanks. Okay, we'll move on to item 7. A request for a waiver of late filing penalty from the Lincoln County Republican Committee. Is there anyone here?
Mr. Cohen,
Okay,
and I just at the Northeast Committee session. Oh, and now Mr. Michael John is asking to be admitted.
let's get to him later.
Okay.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Thank you for coming. We're just moving on to your item, and I'm going to ask Mr. Wayne for a little background on this.
So this is a request by the Lincoln County Republican Committee for a penalty waiver. The report was due at the same deadline as the last item, which was July 15th. Mr. Cohen had been in touch with Ms. Burke about some obstacles that were in the way of him understanding all the data that needed to be entered. My understanding is that the previous officers of the committee had resigned. All of the previous officers resigned, and he did not have access to the bank statements, is my secondhand understanding. So that if you don't know all the activity, you can't file the report, or you certainly don't have less time to file the report. So the commission has a track record, as I mentioned, in the past couple of years of reducing 4 penalties for these local party committees from 500 to 100. And let me just say that that reflects that there are oftentimes committees don't have to file these reports that often. They're unfamiliar with requirements. There can be a lot of turnover. Sometimes people don't receive notices. So as Commissioner Hastings mentioned, with these town and county party committees, the commission does have a history of more leniency than our other filers. So the commission staff is recommending a reduction in the penalty from 500 to 100, similar to those other cases, because we think that there were events that were outside Mr. Cohen's control.
Other questions for Mr. Wayne? Okay, Mr. Cohen, would you like to present your case?
Well, thank you for allowing me to attend this meeting via Zoom. That's very helpful. As far as the report filing, as he stated, it was the entire executive committee resigned on the very first meeting I attended with the Lincoln County Republican Committee.
Up to you.
Well, no, the lucky part was when I walked in right after the meeting started, the second meeting, and someone nominated me as the treasurer.
Usually if you walk in late, you get elected vice president.
Yeah, I think that's what happened. So from that point forward, I mean, that was June 22nd was when I was elected treasurer. And so we started basically from that day trying to figure out exactly what it was, because I'd never, like I said, that was only my second introduction into the political atmosphere. And so I got the postcard that said that I had this report to file, and I reached out to Emma. I ended up getting access to the bank records on July 15th. So the day the report was due, I gained access. And so like a madman, I started entering all the information in, not knowing that whether or not we were going to meet that $1,500 threshold. I didn't know to ask Emma to allow me to hit the file button. So at like 11:55 or something like that, I finally got all the transactions in, but there was no button for me to click, so I couldn't file.
All right. Anybody have questions for Mr. Cohen?
Okay, I don't understand the no button to.
I'm happy to explain that.
Okay.
Ms. Burke.
So the majority, I think, as you had mentioned earlier, the majority of local and county party committees do not have to file all of the time because they have to reach a $1,500 threshold to have to file. So the postcard that they received is basically, you might have to file this report if you've crossed the 1,500. If you have to let me know, because I actually have to manually go into each committee and add the report for them to file. So I had been in touch with Mr. Cohen about, you know, if we have to file a report, it might be late. He hadn't even had a chance to see the bank records. So it was basically, I didn't know if they needed to file a report because he didn't know if they needed to file a report. And unfortunately, because he didn't get the bank records until the deadline, and then the deadline was on Friday, and then we go into a weekend. I did not know they needed a report until he knew, which was after 5 p.m. on the 15th. So that's why there was nothing for him to click yet, because the report had not been added. So, because if I added the reports to everyone, I would have to do a lot more of deleting and people getting late notices inadvertently than adding them as I'm told they're needed.
And you'd receive a lot of reports that didn't really need to be filed.
Yes, exactly. So that's why it's done this way, and Mr. Cohen just wound up in a very unfortunate situation.
Yeah. Any other questions for anyone? Yes.
I have a question for him, and just on the side, it's my own curiosity. Geography quiz. Maine has 16 counties,
Yes,
and generally you have a DNR committee in each
Mhm.
county.
Yeah.
Are you dealing with 32 county committees?
technically, yes, and then plus all the town committees.
And so ballpark, the ones that have to file reports, what does that add up to?
I would say, with this past one, it was probably 50 to 60 reports.
Really?
And then they have another one due 11 days before the general election. And I've already talked to a number of committees that didn't have to file the July one, but will
have
have
to.
crossed the 1,500 threshold by this coming one, so it will
Right.
increase.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And just an editorial comment to Mr. Is it Cohen? Thank you for not realizing you were at $1,428 and stopped. And appreciate that.
Any other
Absolutely.
questions? Mr. Cohen or Mr. Wayne or Ms. Burke? Okay, I'm gonna make a motion that we waive the fine to the extent that the fine is $100. I think Mr. Cohen found himself in a really difficult situation and kind of heroically rose to the situation, but still kind of got caught. I think it was through no fault of the commission or the system or anything that this was filed late. So I'm gonna move that we impose $100 fine and waive the rest. Is there a second?
I'll say, I got it.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. The Commissioner Hastings.
My comment would be if it was Mr. Cohen who was, the fine was addressed to, I'd probably waive the whole thing.
Yeah.
But this is a fine against the committee, and
Yeah.
I think the committee by a mass resignation shouldn't be rewarded for completely, so
For leaving him in a fix.
it's leaving him in a lurch. And Mr. Cohen, I don't look at this as a fine against you personally at all. you were left in a terrible position,
That's a great point.
Yeah.
but your committee left you in the lurch and should not get off scot-free because of it.
I agree 100%.
That is a good point. I hadn't thought about it that way. I was really thinking, geez, he was in a position where he couldn't, couldn't file. But I think that you're right. That I could, again, I don't think people are trying to be nefarious here, but people could say, oh, I can't do it. That's,
Right. Right.
so.
Right.
But I am in favor of reducing it to $100.
Any other thoughts? Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the fine be reduced to $100 and the rest be waived. Everyone who agrees, please raise your hand. It's 5-0 vote that the fine is waived, all except for $100. And thank you, Mr. Cohen, for coming. And again, I think we all agree that you rose to the situation in kind of heroic fashion. So,
I appreciate that very much.
and thank you for filling us in on the details.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to agenda item 8. This is regarding the investigation of software provided by Alec. We've been kind of back and forth over this a couple times. And I think everybody agrees that we need to put the investigation to bed. Mr. Wayne, anything to add?
Well, it's evident from the materials, but for anybody who's watching this fresh, this has been considered at the June meeting and the July meeting, and there was a motion made to discontinue the investigation, but concerns were expressed by commissioners that this might lead to wrong inferences, that it was appropriate for candidates to access campaign software and not pay for it, or that this particular software had no value. So the commission has been working on just what is the right motion to bring this to a conclusion. And I received a couple of versions of a motion from two different commissioners, Commissioner Leclerc and Commissioner Schneider, and they are in the written materials in that order. And
I think they're in the reverse order.
oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, so I may have misspoke, but anyway, they're in there, and it's sort of up to you how you want to proceed in terms of reaching the right motion.
Do you want to give us just a kind of a brief idea of what you're working on for educational materials, how to get those distributed?
Sure, absolutely. Well, we did do we've already started on the education materials. We sent a brightly colored pink neon reddish.
Yeah.
That nobody can miss.
It was half the size of an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. I had sent an image around to the commissioners. So for anyone who knows, this was an alert to the candidates that if they are receiving software for the purpose of helping them in their political campaigns, that very well could be an in-kind contribution, and probably is an in-kind contribution, except that there is an exception. I'll get to with the data, but it said this may be a violation of the contribution limits if you're accepting campaign contributions the traditional way, or it could be inconsistent with being a Maine Election Act candidate. And we did get concerns. So candidates were aware of the mailing. I got a concerned call from the campaign director for one of the legislative caucuses. He was like, I'm getting a lot of concern from the candidates about this. Why are you sending this out? People are worried they've done something wrong. So I think that there was educational benefit to it. And we will continue with this. We will make sure that the language in the candidate guidebook that we publish every 2 years, is updated, and, it's tweaked to specifically highlight this in the in-kind contribution section. So that's what we have on tap now, but we're open to other ideas as well.
Great. I personally, I really appreciate the effort you're making to kind of get the word out. So I think it's important. Any questions for Mr. Wayne? Okay. If you're not counting the cover page, but counting the memo, I would like to move that we make the motion that's on pages 3 and 4 to bring the investigation to a halt. Is there a second?
one is three.
That's in the small.
Oh, not counting the cover.
That's
Oh.
the first.
You're right, it is in the order that you mentioned, I thought.
So that's the
Okay, so
first.
the first page is the one that says to commission. And then pages 2 and 3 are another form of the motion. 2 and 3, yeah, 4 and 5 are a motion that I'm moving.
The first iteration of the motion, is that Commissioner LeClaire's?
It is,
And the second one is the one that you have proposed.
correct,
And that's the one you're moving for.
correct. I'm sorry,
No,
that was an inelegant way to try to
Yeah,
do
that
this.
was elegant as it could get.
Can we just identify them by the
The author, yeah, sure.
What are the differences? I mean, I'm trying to think of somebody.
Yeah, I'll be happy to tell you about mine. What I did, I started from the proposition that it's time to bring a halt to the investigation. I think we all agree with that. And Commissioner LeClaire had prepared a motion for the last meeting that had quite a lot of meat to it, and I used her motion as a basis for drafting this motion. I went through carefully and I thought about the information that we have direct evidence of from our investigation. And I included that in the motion. I took out all of the stuff that we did not have direct information or direct evidence of from our investigation. And I kind of, I understand that there are people, commissioners who want to make a statement with this motion. I don't particularly want to make a statement except to the extent that I want to bring the investigation to a close and I want to educate candidates going forward about the potential for trouble from this, from situations like this. And so I excised the parts of of Commissioner LeClaire's motion that really to me seemed overly political and overly strident in making comments about the situation. And I included the things that to me seemed most evidence-based and most factual, and put together the motion on that basis. So I kind of, as I said in my email, I included the parts that I could live with, and I cut out the parts that I couldn't live with. And I came up with this motion. Commissioner LeClaire, would you like to?
Thank you. Karen. First of all, the commission staff has spent an enormous amount of time on this, as is the commission. We have informally taken action, and by both these motions will be taking action as a result of the investigation. If it was the perfect world, it was up to me, the investigation would not be terminated. We have run into a wall here of availability and staff resources. It's a highly complex issue. And the motion that I submitted was designed to make the best of a complex situation while impacting the information that's given to candidates about this issue. Maine is unique in its Maine Clean Elections Law, which is, I think there may be one other state that even approaches what we do here. So I just as a side note, we know that we're hearing from other states that this has been addressed by, or they dismiss. So we're Maine. We're Maine Clean Elections. We're a commission that's designed and here to protect the integrity of the elections process here. The motion that I submitted gives voice to the specific issues that the commission staff has investigated and made findings on. And I would just ask Mr. Wayne, is there anything that I've put forth in my motion that is not substantiated by the commission for its investigation to date?
Commissioner Leclerc had asked me that exact same question by email about a week ago, and I believe everything in her motion is substantiated.
And I mean, I think our role is not political, and I'm not being political. Our role is to make a record so that if this comes up again, we can come back and look at it. I have tried to simply put in here factual determinations the staff made through this very, exhaustive investigation to date over the last year and a half. And I think we owe it to the public, and we owe it to the Maine Clean Elections process and our elections in general to have a historical record so that we're not sitting here going, well, why did they do this? We did this because of the findings that are in my motion. And I respectfully request that the commission do its job here today and make a historical record, take the action that the staff has already embarked upon in response to our prior hearings, to continue an educational process to ensure that in-kind contributions received for less than fair market value, that candidates need to understand what they are, and they need some historical perspective as to why we just came up. Mr. Wayne stated here today, there's some, well, why are you doing this? We're doing this because of what the facts are that there are the motion that I've submitted. And it's going to be an ongoing process. And all we're doing is putting in the record why we're doing it. I don't think it needs to be cleaned up or sanitized, and I don't think it's political. It's what happened. Respectfully, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Hastings.
Right, I don't mind most of the stuff in here, most of what you entered into this, the facts. I keep it's not whether or not the value of the software to me is not the issue. It's whether it was intended, whether it's intended use, whether it was provided to, what is the term in this statute then? That the purpose of Alex's purpose was to provide this for the purpose of, isn't that required?
Yes, purpose of influence an election.
And that's a finding I don't think we can make. We don't have any facts that would say that. Other than the fact that it was provided, that's the only fact we have that was the purpose of it. In fact, their stated purpose was to use it only for constituent services, and you were not to use it for. So I don't think, we cannot ascertain. I don't like the language conclusively, which assumes that we think it's in violation, but we can't conclusively find it. And whether and this could entail litigation, I mean, that should not go into our decision as to whether or not there was a violation. So except for some of the language in paragraph 7, I am perfectly satisfied with your motion, Commissioner Leclerc. But I think the key thing we can't find is that it was provided for the purpose of. For instance, the two candidates that agreed that we know received it didn't use it. And we took, and from our perspective, I believe the commission said because you didn't use it, you were not, you as a candidate were not in violation. It was not the receipt of it, it was the use of it. I think, our decision turned on with them. So I really think this is all about whether or not it was provided for the purpose of. And I think at this point, I don't think that, I don't feel the commissioner that I can say that that was provided for that purpose, and that's what the motion.
If I could respond briefly, first of all, we're not making a finding against Alec. We're simply stating that we can't make the determination of what's for the investigation is incomplete. And we are not making a finding against Alec. We are directing staff to make sure that candidates in the future are aware of this issue and that in-kind contributions of campaign-assisted software delivered and received for less than fair market value have potentiality of impacting their the law under campaign, traditionally funded campaign as campaigns, as well as and even more easily make the election candidates. So we're not making a finding here. We're simply stating the fact, and the fact is it can't be conclusively determined either way. And I think it's important for Maine to stand very clear on what it's been able to find and what it hasn't been able to find.
But with all due respect, it says cannot conclusively ascertain without dedicating more resources to make documented requests. And then it kind of states that we're surrendering because that's hard.
And it is hard.
It is
And
hard.
that's
But we're not-
the truth.
Yeah, but I don't think
We all make decisions. I worked in legal services for 13 years.
Yeah.
And one of the most common phrases I use, based on scarce staff resources, your case is meritorious, but we can't take it. We don't have the ability, without sacrificing other staff responsibilities here in the state of Maine, to be litigating a case down in Virginia against a, it's Virginia, right?
Yeah.
So it states the truth. And that's all I'm asking for.
Wish them
I'm going to try very carefully to be fairly succinct for me and be very clear and very honest. Most of us, he looks to his left, it says most of us have been considering this issue in all its forms. I believe for over a year. And please tell me if I'm wrong, but it's my recollection that very early on, several of the commissioners, including myself, expressed an opinion of or a history of affiliation with Alec. And it did not immediately devolve into anything political. It did not become this is good and this is bad, or this is left and this is right. But I will remind the world that I expressed some concerns about the organization. I would have similar concerns regardless of party affiliation or not of any similar organization. And my initial point was a concern that by creating templates for state laws on specific issues and distributing them through membership to state legislatures, in my mind, partly co-opted the purpose of state legislatures and the difference between fed and state, and could potentially get in the way of elected officials serving their constituents versus messaging from a national organization. I may not have said it that carefully, but that's in essence what I was talking about. I was not talking about any history with software, any detailed knowledge of what the organization did, or any history with it. Last night, I was thinking about a year's worth of work, and I just wanted to say a couple of things. Part of this is in response to statements made by Alec's counsel during this year-long process. And what I wanted to say was this. I believe that any party should be able to bring appropriate complaints to this commission as long as the subject is concerned with Maine law and the rights of Maine voters. That our lengthy investigative work concerning the American Legislative Exchange Council has been undertaken objectively and without regard for party affiliation. And that respectful expression of differing opinions and conclusions by commissioners concerning matters brought before us results in a more thorough analytical process and a stronger Maine Ethics Commission. And I think this has been arduous work that in some fashion is going to continue to benefit the state.
Any other thoughts? Yeah, please.
I have thoughts about the two, I would say the two motions, the two proposed languages, and then hearing from what the commissioner said this morning. Although I guess maybe we're not at this stage, because right now there's a motion on the table to adopt your
Correct, and it has not been seconded, so,
so I'll hold. wait
okay.
For the proper time.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I'll just suggest I have some proposed minor amendments to Commissioner Leclerc's motion,
Okay,
and maybe I'll say them, and then that might help folks decide what they want to go. Hearing what the other commissioners have said, one suggestion I have. And first I'll say, being new to this process, as you said, I have not been dealing with this for a year. I'm trying to read all the materials and get myself caught up, but certainly having not been at the commission meeting.
It can be helpful.
Yeah, so but I feel a bit more distant
Yep.
from things. And hearing that Commissioner Leclerc's, factual statements are substantiated, which makes sense to me. I understand the suggestion that paragraph 7 could come across maybe stronger than we might want. So here's suggested language, I guess, to paragraph 7 that maybe we could all reach agreement on. The commission cannot determine whether or not Alex's purpose is in providing care software to its legislative members was campaign related. And ask the commission to cease investigating at this time, period.
or direct.
Thank you. Yeah. And otherwise, I think the rest of the.
I think it's good language. in my opinion.
And would you change at the top of the next page, in the second line, it says that the commission suspend the investigation. Would you change that to cease?
And we probably, the suspending would mean that it's still a docket or something.
Right, which doesn't mean an investigation
Sounds like
can be
it could be
reinitiated.
forgotten, yeah.
What about without prejudice?
Sure. Cease without prejudice, that's fine with me.
That's fine. Did somebody write down that language?
I think Commissioner Newman has it written down.
Okay.
Would you like to make the motion, Commissioner Newman?
So I'll make a motion to repeat it or?
Yeah, I think we
Okay.
could repeat to make sure.
The paragraphs that we adopt, Commissioner Leclerc's written motion with a change to paragraph 7 to read. The commission cannot determine whether or not Alex's purpose was in providing the care software to its legislative. Sorry, I have to, let me think about it for 1 second. I don't know. Yeah, okay. The commission cannot determine whether or not Alex's purpose in providing the care software to its legislative members was campaign related, and therefore directs the commission to, maybe I'll be wrong, to cease investigating without prejudice. To cease investigating this matter without prejudice, period. How's that done?
Well, it's kind of changing to. I think that the cease without prejudice belongs in the top, at the top of the page.
Yeah, it would be redundant,
Yeah, so just after campaign related.
period, yeah.
And then what does it say after? We're gonna say cease. Without prejudice.
Instead of suspend, replace the word suspend with cease without prejudice.
Well, okay, that works for me.
I'm gonna, I can't. I think it's important.
Well, actually,
I
how
think-
could we, do you want to make that as a motion?
Yeah, I think I did.
Okay,
That's
is
my
it,
motion.
has it been second?
I will second.
Okay, so it's been motion.
Okay, thanks for that, so I appreciate it.
Yep.
The proposed change infers that the commission can't do it after a full investigation. And what I'm trying to put in paragraph 7 is that this has not been a full investigation. That we're up against a national organization, not up against, but we're involved with a national organization with massive resources that's not located within the state. And I do think it's important for a historical perspective, if this does come up again, that this was suspended or ceased without prejudice, because we made a value determination that the staff and commission resources can be better spent elsewhere, and that this solution of educating candidates responds to what our concerns are. But I don't think that the change acknowledges what the truth is and why we're doing this. And again, just as I believe that's our role here.
Would you like to make a motion to amend?
Me? Yeah. Yeah, well, there's a motion to amend.
Right now,
I'm simply requesting that the paragraph 7, I think, accurately reflects what has gone on, and would move that it would remain there in that form.
okay, so what Commissioner Newman's motion was is that this is put before the commission in its changed form as she described it. So your motion would be to amend it back to the way it's printed.
Yes,
Commissioner,
confusing is.
Commissioner Leclerc, how about something like this? And I'll just say, I understand that. I don't think that saying that the commission cannot determine. I personally don't think that it
Well,
suggests.
actually, can we wait 2 seconds? Is there a second?
Where are we? We've got a motion. Is this a motion to amend?
Yes.
The-
Commissioner Leclerc is making a motion
Is
to
that-
amend Commissioner Newman's.
To
motion.
put paragraph 7 back to its original language.
Yes. Yes. Is there a second for that?
I'll second the amendment.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded that the motion that Commissioner Newman moved be amended back to the way it's printed.
Question, this is just a detail,
Sure.
but neither of those addressed what I think we all agree to in the top of page 3 with the cease without prejudice. So the amendment is strictly, that has been without voice adopted.
Yes, I think that's fine.
It's implicit in
Yeah.
both.
Both questions.
So, Commissioner Leclerc, discussion on your amendment to the motion. With changing the language in paragraph 7 to the commission cannot, without further non-feasible investigation, determine whether or not Alex purposely providing the care software to its legislative members was campaign related. I'm trying to get at your point that I don't read cannot to mean after full investigation, but I'm trying to make it explicit. I'm saying it's just saying it's non-feasible.
If we could just maybe add that it's a not feasible or. Because of.
If you want to change the language and come up with a different motion.
Well, I mean, it's difficult, to say the scarce staff resources or whatever. Without explaining, we are talking about litigating a foreign. So, I mean, that's why I did put that in there. And an explanation, It's not that we don't have the expertise or the qualified individuals, we certainly do. But we're just making a value judgment of the use of commission staff. That kind of litigation up there is probably not worthwhile. There's a better way of saying it.
How about cannot determine based on the evidence now before?
Well, again, I think that we're making a determination not to expend further staff resources.
And that's important in the motion. What about saying something like cannot further, without further investigation, comma, which is not feasible due to, scarce staff
Yes,
resources.
that's fine.
So would you like to change your motion to amend in some way? Your motion right now stands that you want to assert paragraph 7 as it's written.
I wrote it down.
Make a suggestion for how I should make
Here's my suggestion.
Okay.
Or I guess this could be an amendment to your amendment.
All right, I'll withdraw.
I think you have to vote down the amendment.
Yeah.
Withdraw my-
Well, let's vote it down.
You only have one amendment.
Yeah.
You vote it down.
Okay, so we'll vote down your amendment, and then I'll propose a new
Or you can
amendment.
withdraw your motion.
Yes.
I can withdraw my amendment.
Yeah.
And
Somebody
then,
will withdraw the
because I
second.
haven't heard the final language. I withdraw, yes,
So are you going to withdraw your amendment?
I'm gonna withdraw.
And
And
I'll
the
make an
second?
amendment to my own motion.
Okay.
How we
So-
doing?
Doing great, actually.
So right now, we have Commissioner Newman's original motion to institute this motion as it was changed by her originally. Now she's moving to amend it.
Amend myself.
Yes.
Okay. The commission cannot determine without further investigation, which is not, which is not feasible due to scarce staff resources, whether or not Alex's purpose in providing the CARE software to its legislative members was campaign related. Here.
Yes. I would think that's all.
Did someone get that?
Yes.
I think a few of us did, yeah.
Someone who writes best.
And you want to leave in cease without prejudice on
Yeah. That not,
the next paragraph.
yes.
Does everybody get that? Is there a second to that? Second. Okay. Discussion. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that the motion be amended with the new language that Commissioner Newman just described. Are we ready for a vote?
I just really want to thank the staff for their efforts on this.
I would join you in that. Yep, it's been a long, hard road.
Do these footnotes need to be part of a motion?
Yes, they are part of it.
That's how I interpret it. Okay, everyone who's in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Everyone who's opposed? It's 4-1 in favor of the amendment. So Commissioner Newman's original motion has been amended as she described. Is there discussion on the amended motion? Okay, so everyone who's in favor of the amended motion, please raise your hand. Everyone who's opposed? It's 4-1 in favor of the amended motion. Thank you all for pushing through this.
Good job with the Robert's rules there.
Assist. No, it wasn't easy to steer. I had an assist. All right, moving on to agenda item 9. This is a failure to file statements of sources of income by several legislative candidates. Are any of them available on Zoom or here? Okay. Mr. Wayne.
The commission earlier this year heard some enforcement actions relating to the requirement for legislators who are members to file an annual statement of the sources of their income. But there's also a requirement for candidates who are not currently serving to file the exact same statement. And the statement is due on August 15th of the election year. And I just want to credit some really heroic work by our commission assistant, Julia Obie, and our assistant director, Martha Courier, because without, they went at this and we received much better results than we previously did. The staff, these people are not office holders. And so in previous years, election years, the staff has not always given this as much of a priority, and they achieved some really great results. So almost all the candidates who are not currently serving did file the statement, but there were 3 candidates who still have not: Timothy Keenan, Daniel Merrill, and Nancy P.G. One of them, I believe it's Mr. Merrill, actually withdrew as a candidate after the August 15th deadline. He's not technically still a candidate. Again, Martha and Julie were great in terms of keeping records of who had filed and who had not, and a number of emails and letters were sent before and after the deadline. There were emails sent on July 13th and August 1st, which were before the deadline. And if I misstate any of the correspondence, I hope Martha will correct me. Then on the day of the deadline, there was an email that went out to them with, that was on August 15th. And then on August 16th, I believe there was an email to, and it wasn't just to these 3, but it was to anybody who had not yet filed. There was an email with a PDF, sort of an electronic letter that was sent by email. And then on September 1st, there was an actual US mail letter sent, at least to these 3 candidates. So we're down to 3 in spite of many notices. Some of these candidates have, I guess I just have to say, been negligent or slow in filing previous filings with our office earlier this year. So there's a little bit of a track record with regard to 2 of these people. And so we, at the very least, are recommending that the commission find that they have violated Title I, Section 1016C. And if you want to treat this matter the same as the legislative candidates, you would refer this to the Office of the Attorney General for collection of a penalty of up to $100 to a civil action. Although, and I don't want to state it, the Attorney General decided not to pursue that with respect to the legislators earlier this year. I hope I said that.
Yeah, I'm happy to further address that if you have questions.
Please.
Yeah, that'd be great.
In terms of the last set, that this is an issue where the Office of Attorney General, which would have to, initiate the action to collect the penalties, has prosecutorial discretion about whether or not to act on a referral in order to pursue those. And I think under the facts of those particular cases that were referred, when I think all 3 of the referrals involved candidates who actually did file the statement fairly shortly after the deadline, the Attorney General exercised his prosecutorial discretion not to pursue those civil violations, and instead, I think letters were issued instead to the candidates notifying. So that does not mean the same result would happen this time. Right. Obviously, the facts are different, and it will be a fact-specific determination that the Attorney General would make.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Wayne or Mr. Bolton?
Did anybody know how effective the letters were?
Well, they had, again, in that case, they had already filed the reports when the letters were sent out, so there was nothing more for them, nothing more to be done, no more action to sort of try to encourage.
I wonder about making a referral with respect to a candidate that actually did withdraw, even though after the deadline. I mean, purpose of this is, in case you get elected, where's your source of income? You withdraw from the race. Maybe it doesn't meet the statute, but the purpose of the report is obviated by the withdrawal in any case.
I agree. I do think that that's Mr. Miro.
Yeah.
Is in a different class than the others, although I guess we could leave it up to Attorney General to make that decision with the others.
For the other 2.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I agree. I think it's to provide the public with information about candidates and not just if they get elected, right? I think it's important for people to know what dogs candidates they're going to fight to.
Well, if they withdrew before August 15th, apparently was deemed unimportant. So personally, I'm not sure why it became more important on like the 60th, if they still withdrew. I mean, I know what the statute says, but it's just
But gently, I'm with you in the real world, but gently back at you. David, we've had other discussions almost like this all morning about what a difference a day makes. We could sing the song.
Yeah, I understand.
So my inclination would be to launch a process and let the AG perhaps sort that out.
My inclination would be to find a violation for that candidate, but not refer it, and find a violation in all three, but only refer the
The
other
other
two.
two. That's not a bad course.
Yeah.
What do people think?
I mean,
I can live with it.
Yeah, I think that-
All right.
I really wonder, an attorney general arguing in front of a district court judge over this, what's the judge probably gonna scratch it? His or her head.
So just for my clarification, I'm sorry, the words referral to the attorney general, just for collection of the penalty.
No,
if-
the penalty actually has to be adjudicated, so we would actually have to put on evidence in the district court to show that a violation occurred. It's because most of the commission statutes authorize the commission to impose penalties. But when a statute phrases it in terms of somebody committing a civil violation for which a penalty can be adjudged, that means it has to go to court for a determination of both whether the penalty or whether the violation occurred and then what the fine should be.
So the AG would issue a complaint, right?
We would file, yeah, if we were to go forward, we would actually file a complaint. And there's an expedited process for these civil violations, under Rule Civil Procedure 80H, I think it is. So they can be dealt with fairly efficiently, but it's still obviously there's still a fair amount of work involved in it.
But it is our determination at the outset whether there was a violation. It's just whether the AG will pursue that or not, or is there some?
I think your determination is basically advisory to the AG, and then I don't think it would actually have any impact on the court case, but I think it would be, you would essentially be advising the Attorney General that the commission believes that a violation has occurred.
So if we were to, for example, if Mr. Merrill find that a violation occurred but not refer it, what would that mean?
I think it would, it wouldn't really have there'd be no enforcement mechanism. So you would basically just be making a statement. It would appear in the minutes as something that the commission had decided, but I don't think it would have any legal effect in terms of anything.
Well, in terms of the enforcement, but it would still be a finding by the commission.
Correct.
that The
Yeah.
statute had been violated.
That's right. Yeah. So it would have, the force of that determination, I think, and people obviously could go back and look at the minutes and see that the commission had made that determination.
He would not receive a letter unless we directed staff to do so.
You could direct
Simply
staff
be
to
in
send
the
a letter.
minutes.
You could direct staff to send a letter if that's what you, or maybe they would do that anyway. I'm not sure. They wouldn't receive a letter from us unless.
Would you
referred it to
notify
us.
these candidates that there had been a finding that they violated the statute?
Yes, you would.
I figured.
They've all been notified about this proceeding,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so perhaps the same level of interest.
Yeah.
Reply to a letter.
Any other thoughts or questions?
I don't know, if Commissioner, anything moved already, but I moved to proceed as he suggested, which is find a violation against all three and refer Mr. Keenan and Ms. Pichet to the Attorney General's office.
I'll second that. Any other discussion? Okay, everybody who agrees with the course of action of finding violations of 1 MRS section 1016C and referral of the two candidates, Keenan and Pichet, to the AG for collection of a penalty of up to $100 through a civil action. Please raise your hand. And it's 5-0, but that's the course of action. Thank you. Is there any further business to come before the commission? All right, that hearing none, Is there a motion?
Move we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Does it need one?
It does.
Second.
It's not debatable, so all in favor, please raise your hand. It's been moved, second, and then voted that the commission adjourned. So thank you all very much. Thank you to the staff for your exemplary work.
That's